Hello everyone and welcome to Salesforce Mojo. It's been a while since I've had a video. I've been on a little bit of a content creation hiatus, but I am back now and hopefully we'll create a couple of these throughout the holiday season into next year. Today we're going to be covering Data Cloud for Commerce Cloud. And I'm pretty excited about this video. It's a little bit adjacent to some of the core Commerce Cloud functionality that we've been setting up. But I think in the day and age that we live in, being able to have a multi-cloud experience and solution, especially when it comes to Commerce Cloud, which relies on data and other clouds for the proper use of Commerce Cloud, I think Data Cloud is going to be a pivotal connection that we all need to make in the coming months. So we're going to talk about how to actually connect that all today, how to get Data Cloud and Commerce Cloud working together, how to do a little bit of lightweight segmentation, and then we're going to allude a little bit to where we're going to go with how to start using this. So I hope you enjoyed today's video, and as I mentioned, I'm trying to get a little more regular on these videos moving forward. But please give me a like on here if you like the content, put a comment in if you have any questions about this, and I'll try to answer those, and let's jump right into it. So let's begin with the setup steps. At a high level, there's really four main setup steps we're going to be going through. The first one is a typical commerce enablement. Now we're not going to cover this in depth because we've done this before and we probably will actually do another one here shortly of the kind of the new commerce enablement steps since they've been abbreviated and changed over the last couple of releases. We're going to focus on though the next three here. The next one is Data Cloud enablement piece. The third is providing permissions specifically to our use case here for the commerce use case, I should say. And fourth is the Commerce Data Cloud setup. And at a surface level, the four are pretty straightforward, but they're actually a little bit more in depth as you get into 3 and 4. So we're going to spend a little bit of time there. And on that note, the next one is the connector permissions. So within Data Cloud, there is a permission set called Data Cloud Salesforce Connector. And this actually provides Data Cloud the access level to the org you've connected to, whether that's the initial org that you spun up Data Cloud in or to a connected org. So it's really important that you go and actually set up this connector permission set with these objects in order for you to be able to see the commerce data bundle. Now, if you don't do this, the first time you go in, I'll actually show that as I get in the demo here, you're not going to see anything as far as commerce goes. And so you do need to enable all of these. And if you miss a couple of them, it's going to show you some errors. And so you can kind of like work through that as you go. The two that I found that weren't on the official documentation link that you see above is price book and price book entry. I found that if I don't do those two, I actually get errors related to some of the other objects. And after digging into those objects, it had all the right permissions. And I found out that I needed to actually have price book and price book entry on this list as well. So make sure you do that as well. So with that being said, why don't we go through 1 and 2 here real quick, and I'll show a little bits of this as I get into the demo, and then we'll actually break, come back and do the permissions, and then we'll actually get into 4, which is the most complicated of the steps. As we jump into the demo here, I just want to mention that this is not my normal Salesforce Mojo instance. Actually getting Data Cloud and all the other licenses I need into a single org, this easiest way is actually to spin up a SDO since I'm part of a partner, and so I can spin up this org that has all these licenses in it fairly quickly through the provisioning process. So that's the org I'm in right now, so you'll notice that the URL is different and the data is different, and that's okay for our use case today. I just wanted to call that out. It may look slightly different here and there on some screens because the way they put the components on here are different than a typical org. So I just wanted to kind of give that preface before we jump in. I'm going to go through a normal commerce, just start right here, or just click next and have it complete the setup. And it's going to go through the basics of the setup here. And it takes a couple of minutes. So once this is complete, I'll come back and we actually can keep going from there. Okay, that took a couple minutes, but now we have commerce set up, and I'll just make a mention that this is way easier than before. In past videos, you've seen me go through the setup steps. So we've got a lot of this set up just with a single button click. Now we're going to go and do a similar thing here. We're actually going to go over into Data Cloud, and you can either find it through the search right here, or a lot of times if you're in an org that has the right licenses, you'll see it right here on the home screen as well. So either one, whether it's setup or let's go, it'll pop you into a new window, which is going to take you to the Data Cloud setup steps. This one is also as easy as the last one to get started. However, there is quite a bit more to get Commerce connected in correctly into Data Cloud. I'll also mention that this one takes quite a bit longer too as it initializes. So we're going to click the button here, let it run, and then when it's done, I'll come back and we'll kind of talk a little more about this and go on to the next step. Okay, we're all set up now. We have a Data Cloud instance. It took about an hour and a half for this to actually fully provision and go through the 4 steps I showed before. But you can see we have an instance now, and we have a couple of steps here that we optionally can do. Clicking the assign permissions is really just going to take us to users and make sure you actually have a Data Cloud user. My user in this instance already has one. That's just how it's provisioned, but you will need to make sure that you have that. And then if you plan to connect into the org right here or any other data sources, you can do that through these steps, but it's not necessary at this point. So at this point, what we want to do is we actually want to go and do some of the other steps that are required for us to get everything provisioned correctly for Commerce. So I broke this out into a little bit more detail here, just so we can kind of go this one at a time here. Number one is you actually need to install the Salesforce CDP Commerce package in Data Cloud. So that's a kind of a pre-step in order for any Commerce things to show up. Then we need to actually do the objects and permissioning that we mentioned before in that separate slide that I showed you of all those objects. And then from there, we can actually go and try to ingest this data as a data stream into Data Cloud. And then we have a couple more steps. We'll come back to this in a minute. But let's actually go over and I'll show you where to find that in the Data Cloud setup section. Okay, so back on this screen here, this is normal setup. You actually want to go over into setup on the top right, and there's Data Cloud setup. This will open up another setup window here, and you can see the difference. It says Data Cloud setup. So from here, what we want to do is we want to go down to Salesforce CRM, these integrations, and you can see that there are 5 different standard bundles, and each one of these bundles will give you different sets of data or data bundles to be able to be imported. So they don't automatically pull this data in, but it does install a package. So we need this one right here, the Salesforce CDP Commerce Cloud, and we'll go ahead and click install. This will take you to a normal install window here where it'll let you install this package. Looks like it's taken a second in this instance. Once we get to the screen, we'll install it for admins only right now. And then once this is done, we'll hop back over into the setup screen and we'll see that it actually has been installed. Okay, so we're back here in the Salesforce integration section, and you can see that we have CDP Salesforce Commerce enabled with version 1.11. Which is great. So that's what we need to do on the back end here. Now we're going to hop over and actually go to the front end of Data Cloud. And you can just do that by going to your app launcher and going to Data Cloud. If you don't see that, that means you're probably missing some permissions. So go ahead and go over to your permission sets and make sure you have the Data Cloud admin permission set. So we're going to go into data streams, and you'll notice that in this instance, we only have kind of the tenant billing stuff that comes out of the box, but nothing else right now. So we're going to click New, and there are a couple different ways to ingest data into Data Cloud. We're not going to cover all those today. We're specifically going to cover the Salesforce CRM objects, which is where we can see our data bundles. So now that that's loaded, you'll see that we have, a couple of the sales service, omni-channel, personalization bundle, but we don't see any commerce. We just installed the package. Why don't we see any commerce bundles? Well, that's because the objects are missing. So now we're going to go through and we're actually going to go back to our back end here, and we're going to go into our permission sets. And once we get to our permission sets, we should see one that says Data Cloud. We're going to filter by D, and then that should bring up our Data Cloud ones. And you can see we've got the Data Cloud Salesforce connector. And so this is actually where we need to go in, and once this loads, we'll go into objects, object settings here, and then we'll need to go through each object one at a time and actually provide view all or read, depending on what you want to do in your org. This is a demo org, so I'm going to go view all for all of them to keep it simple, and then make sure that they have read access to all the fields you want access to from your connector. This is going to take a while. I think the last time it took me 20 minutes or so to kind of click through each one of these objects and make sure that it has the right access. And I also just wanted to show this is the official documentation that I linked in that slide I showed earlier. But it shows you which ones need object level access and then which ones only need field level access. And some of these are optional and some of them are required in order for the bundle to work correctly. And you'll notice that it doesn't have any of the price book ones, so make sure you do that from my my deck or my slide that I showed earlier, and then you have all the rest of these taken care of. So I'm going to go off and do that, and we'll come back once I'm done. Okay, so I've gone through and added all the object and field permission that is mentioned in that documentation. I actually didn't do the price book and price book entry. I'm curious to see if it pops up the same error that I mentioned last time. So let's go ahead and click New. And when we click the Salesforce CRM, we should see a new set of bundles that show up for us now because the threshold of number of objects that has access to is enough for it to be able to show the bundle. So once it loads, we should see a B2B commerce and a D2C commerce. Now, and a few others as well. We can see that order management is now on here as well. From what I can tell, and just looking at the objects that are shown over here, the objects that are actually brought in between D2C and B2B are the same. Don't quote me on that, but I've done both of them now in different orgs and they seem to have the same connections. Although you may see the actual data stream and DMOs connected differently, but I haven't analyzed that. So anyway, just a note here that pick the one that's most applicable. I can't verify yet if they're the same or not. But if you go in, and we're going to actually do B2B because that's the storefront we have set up in this instance. And once we click that, we'll go into Next. Okay, so this is exactly the screen I saw last time. And I've provided access to all of these objects. So I'm going to actually hop over. We're going to try to do this live here. And if I look for price book and price book entries, we're actually going to pop those open and provide access. And we'll try to do this live here and see if that resolves it again in this instance. So I'm going to provide it, let's see, read and read on all the fields. And then I'll also hop over into price book entries. And this one actually looks like it has the full access, so it might just be price book that it needs. So we're going to hop back over here and we'll close out of that. And we're going to do a refresh. And we're going to try to do that one more time. And we'll hop into our B2B bundle again. These screens do take a moment to load, so there we go. So we'll pop over into Next. And it looks like we got the rest of the issues fixed, but we also don't have the the contact point address, which if I remember correctly, I actually did that one just because I saw it in the list last time, but it actually also is not on the list that is mentioned in the help documentation. So let's see if we can get this fixed here, and that should allow us to import. And just as a note, I will mention this to the product team so that they can get that updated in the documentation. But just as if you're watching this, now you know price book and contact point address are required. And so now that we have those enabled, we'll be able to hop back over here, and I'm just going to do a refresh, and I'll try that one more time. Hop back into our data bundles. Okay, perfect. So now we have the threshold met on the objects and field access. And you'll notice on the left-hand side, it gives you all of the objects that it's going to bring in. And then when you click into each one of them, the fields that you're bringing in are actually going to be unique to your instance. So if we go into, I think it was order summary in this one, you can see that this org, because it's an SEO, has a bunch of custom fields in it. Those are not selected by default. So if you have custom fields that you want to bring in, go ahead and click the checkbox next to those. If you just want the defaults, which I do at this point, go ahead and click Next, and that'll actually take you to this preview screen here, and then you can click Deploy, and this will actually launch it into deploying it into your org. and the data streams will actually create data lake objects, which will connect into the DMO. And that's kind of the advantage of using the data bundles, that it's going to do all that hard work for you. Okay, so we're back now after that has successfully created our data streams, and you can see that we have records already in this instance because it's a demo instance. So we're able to pull all that in and we're able to refresh it. You can see that it's automatically created our data lake objects and into our data model. And if we hop over into our data graph, we can see that it has successfully created our data model. In Data Cloud, it maps order summaries to sales orders into the standard data model. And you can see, if you're curious, how that maps into the larger scheme of things back into the account and contact. So all of that being said, we now have all of this mapped in. This is kind of the stage one of being able to start using commerce data in here. So now I'm going to hop over into slides and we're going to show you a couple of different things before we hop back into Data Cloud. Now, there are two different types of data that we should cover here briefly. Up to this point, we've really just dealt with the transactional data. And I say transactional, but I also mean the other types of data like accounts and contacts, all of the information you have about the customer. Those are all pieces that you can bring in through this data stream that we just talked about. However, there's another side of this that is behavioral data or engagement data. And that's what we're going to cover next here. And if we go back to this list, I've actually updated it because I forgot to put it in the initial version of this. But you can see that on line 5, it's enabling Data Cloud LWR connector. So there actually is a connector that will allow us to bring that type of data into our instance. So we're going to do that along with step 4 here, making this data model available at the individual level, and then we'll proceed from there. Okay, so on to step 4 here. So we now have all this data in here, but let's go try to use any of this inside of one of our segments. And right now you can see that we don't have any segments, and we're not going to spend too much time on this today. I just want to show you the difference when we do this step and when we don't. So let's go through the visual builder. We'll go through standard segment. We're going to do it off of individual, so the person, not the account. And we're just going to put in a segment on commerce individual. And we'll do a rapid publish just for testing here, and we were not going to refresh this. So once we actually get into this, you'll notice on the left-hand side we have all of our data here, and it's going to take a second for it to load. But you'll notice one thing very quickly is that we have an account and we've got our individual, and those are kind of the two main objects you're going to segment when it comes to quote-unquote people that you're segmenting against. But once this thing actually loads, you can see that we also have related attributes, and right now we only have 3 related attributes. And those related attributes are not going to be anything to do with the commerce data that we've actually brought in. So that data needs to be connected to our data model in order for us to be able to use it inside of a segment like this, which at the end of the day is ideally what we want to be able to accomplish. So as I open this up, you can see we've got contact point address, contact point email, and contact point phone. So that's helpful. But what if we want to segment on the number of orders or the number of returns they've had? We wouldn't be able to do that. So now that we know that that's a gap, what we can do is we can go over to our data model, and we're going to find sales order. And once this loads, we will be able to go into relationships. I might have to refresh it. It's been a little finicky in this org right now. When I go over to relationships, I can click edit and go to the bottom and add a new relationship. And you can kind of see all the relationships that it has right now to the different objects. And those are visualized in that graph that I showed earlier. But we actually want to add a new bill to account, which is related to a individual. And we want this to be on the primary key. This related field is primary account. And once we have that, quickly we can click save. And we'll close it now. And we'll see that new relationship pop up. And now we've actually connected that order into our data model, and order has a lot of connections in and of itself, as you can see here, to different objects. And so now all of those objects are going to be brought into our data model that we can use inside of our segment. So once this finishes processing, and it looks like it just finished up right there, we'll be able to go over into our segment, hop back into our editor here, and we'll notice that we now have 13 different attributes. And it's all the sales order and information about it. If you don't see ones on here, you can go and actually add those into your data model connections as well. But that step is really important in order for it to be visible in here. So now I can actually pull in like total amount, and I can say that it is greater than $100. If they have an order that's greater than $100, then I want to segment my audience based off of that. And so this should narrow it down from my total population, which is 144, probably down to a handful of individuals, 8 people in this case. So that's a good example of why you need to do that step. But now let's say we want to go a little bit further and we want to actually use our engagement data on our site. Well, we've gotten a way of doing that right now. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to hop over into Experience Builder. You can see I've got my SDO instance here with all the serious branding on here, but that's not important for this this session here. We can go into integrations, and the first thing we're going to do is click Add to Site. And you can learn more about this by clicking on here, which doesn't take you to the site I was wanting it to. So let's actually hop over into the right documentation. If you hop over into this URL here, and you can quickly find this by just typing in Data Cloud for LWR. Now that it's loaded, you can see that we've got a section down here on how to manage the data from your LWR site down here. And this actually shows you how to ingest data and set up Data Cloud and kind of go through those steps. So we're going to quickly go through that here together, but you can find more about that on that link. And so we're going to click Add to Site. We want to share it, yes. And once we do that, we can click Save. And this is going to take a little bit of time, but once it actually is set up, it'll have all the connections in it. And I'm actually going to hop over into a different instance that I pre-set up here because it does take a little bit of time for it to actually run through. Okay, so I'm back in the other site now, and you can see if I go into integrations that this has been enabled. So this is a different instance. One of the things you need to do is make sure it's enabled. But then once you have that enabled, you have to go into advanced, and you need to make sure that it has the script here, which actually enables the content collection. And so this is actually referenced in that article that I mentioned, but this is absolutely essential, otherwise it will not come through. So let's hop over into the Data Cloud side of this in this instance. And you'll notice that we have a handful of new data streams here, and they all are prefixed with Experience Cloud. And you can see some of them are like identities and party identities, and some of them are behavioral events. And those behavioral events are like search and page load and actions that you take on the site. So this is really going to be beneficial for us. And then if we hop over into the Data Cloud setup, I just want to show you the back end of this. You can go over into websites and mobile apps, and you can see that this connector has been set up automatically for us with that click with a schema. And there is a little bit of flexibility in the schema. So if you want to add new events or a different type of data pieces that you want to collect from your LWR site, you can upload a new schema and you can upload a sitemap and read these instructions on how to do that and actually curate this even more. But you do get quite a bit of this with just the out of the box. So we're actually going to stop there. So in this video, we've covered kind of the beginning commerce enablement for Data Cloud, and there's quite a bit of steps there. Next video, we're actually going to go into the use cases, and I'll prelude a couple of those. We're going to be able to do segmentation on the buyer groups inside of Commerce Cloud and be able to connect the two of those together. We're going to be able to do promotion-based segments, and we're going to be able to do segments based on activities. And some of these are features that we will have enabled in the instance. Some of them are relatively new, and it allows us to do expression-based visibility in our storefront based off of buyer groups. So some pretty cool stuff there, and we'll also show a little bit on where Salesforce is planning on going with some of this functionality. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next video.